So now there are two more things to be considered. One thing was just partially covered up when Durgaji quoted about measurement, but we have to take it up more details. Also, there is another issue that is of control. Whether control has any place, any role to play in meditation. Traditionally, control has been given the major role, because they say that unless you are able to control your thoughts, unless you are able to control your desire, unless you are able to control yourself, you are useless as far as meditation is concerned. You can't meditate. So there has to be absolute control over thought, absolute control over yourself, so that you can concentrate precisely on something which you want to concentrate upon. So control has a very important role to play as far as the traditional meditation is concerned. But Krishnaji's approach, there is no place for control. In fact, he is saying that not only in meditation, but even as far as your daily life is concerned, there is no place for control psychologically. Now, this is something very interesting, that even in our daily life, there is no place for control. What does it mean? Does it mean that everybody should have uncontrolled behavior? So whatever comes to one's mind, one simply goes after it without any control and then tries to live according to that. So that then will create a chaos. Control is a very important factor in technology, because without control, the technological development is not possible. If you want to have a nuclear energy, then you have to find out how to control a nuclear reaction, because uncontrolled nuclear reaction will create a lot of damage, and therefore it has to be controlled. So there will be factors of controlling. In fact, control is far more important than the actual process which you want to control, because without control, that process is useless. You can't use it. So control is very important in technology. Similarly, in our actions also, when we see that some of our actions are causing some unacceptable results or consequences, then we want to control those actions. So if I find that my psychological reaction is going to damage my business interest or my other interest, then I want to control that psychological reaction so that that damage is prevented. So even there, we find that the control seems to be very important. And without control, probably the social order also may not be possible. So there, the laws and rules, they control the behavior of the members of the society. And there the control is very much required. If nobody obeys the laws, then the social order is not possible. But in our investigation into ourselves, we want to understand ourselves psychologically, what we are. And we want to explore that freedom where there is no kind of control, which is completely unconditional freedom. Now, to explore that, we have to understand the nature of control and whether it has any role to play in psychological realm. So psychologically, lots of reactions are arising in us. Sometimes we are afraid, sometimes we are angry, sometimes we are jealous, sometimes we feel insecure, sometimes we are this and sometimes we are that. And all these reactions, they influence our day-to-day life. As you know, when you feel jealous, how you behave in your day-to-day situations. When a person is violent or feels violent, then how he behaves in his interaction with his environment. So all these psychological reactions, they tremendously influence our behavior, and therefore we want to control them. But is it really possible to control the psychological reactions? And when a reaction arises, there are only three possibilities probably. One is to escape from it. It is run away as much as possible. Second is to control it, either through suppression or through some other means, control it. Or the third possibility, which is most common, is to yield to it, succumb to it. So you let yourself being taken hold of by that psychological reaction, and you end up in the corresponding action at the physical level and generate consequences, which then you have to bear and suffer those consequences. These are the three possibilities, and each one of us is choosing a possibility which is most suited to him at that time. But Krishnaji points out a fourth possibility, which is to watch that reaction, to watch that psychological reaction. So, if we watch a psychological reaction, then just as we watch things at the physical level in technological field, where through watching we gather a lot of knowledge and information about that thing, and based on that we manage those things. So a similar watching done in the psychological field, gathering a lot of knowledge about that psychological reaction and then using that knowledge to control it, to deal with it. But then that kind of watching only results in that aspect which we call as control. So watching and gathering knowledge out of that watching is not different than that first possibility which we said. The second possibility which we said is to control. You are gathering that knowledge so that you are able to control it. So watching with knowledge is not different than one of these three possibilities, because that knowledge you are going to use to control that psychological reaction, to manage it. But is there a watching without gathering knowledge? So that watching, Krishnaji says is paying attention. So attention is a new factor here. So if you are attentive to a psychological reaction, is the control really necessary? You cannot escape a psychological reaction. You may try to run as much away as possible from that psychological reaction, but the moment you look, you find that you haven't run away at all from that psychological reaction. It is very much with you. And that is because you are not different from your psychological reaction. You are your psychological reaction. So naturally, you cannot run away from yourself. As wherever you may run away, there you are again there as yourself, as that reaction. So the possibility of escaping or running away is out of question. It is meaningless. Trying to run away from these reactions is meaningless because it is simply not possible. It is like running away from yourself. One may run away from oneself through various kinds of occupations. One may keep oneself occupied with many different things. Some may run away from that psychological reaction through intoxicating drinks, some people through sex, some people through many other pursuits. So that is only a respite for the time being. But the moment you are out of that, you are again with that psychological reaction, that content. So the escape really is not possible on permanent basis. There may be a temporary escape through various pursuits, but then as those pursuits end, then all these reactions are back. So that is the reality of one's existence. That is part of one's existence, and therefore really it's not possible to escape from them. And control is through disciplining, through separation, and most of the traditional techniques of meditation, they emphasize on the control. So this control is through disciplining or through separation. And separation and discipline, there is no freedom in that. The mind is not free. The mind is burdened. It is already burdened with a lot of psychological content. And now that is being further added to by all these systems and methods of control. So that only increases the burden of the mind. And all these controls or all these methods and systems, they only make the mind dull. The mind is incapacitated. The mind is made less sensitive. And therefore, such a mind is not capable of investigating the deeper and subtler layers of existence. So, the control has no place. Then what about yielding? When you are yielding to a psychological reaction, that means you are allowing that psychological reaction to take complete hold of yourself and letting it act in your day-to-day life, then you may be generating very serious consequences for yourself. And then those consequences, when you have to go through them, you are actually imprisoned in them. So again, there is no freedom there. But if you are able to attend, if you are able to be attentive to this psychological reaction, so what does that attention mean? Is there an attender in that state of attention? Now, if there is an attender, then it is not attention. Then it becomes concentration. And concentration always has a center from which you concentrate. And therefore, since it is focused on one thing, there are many other things which are also demanding your attention. And then you want to focus on one particular thing. So other things, when they arise, you try to suppress them or try to keep them away and only focus on this one particular thing. But then when the other things do attract your attention, then during that time you are distracted from your original focus, which you had chosen to pay attention to. And when you realize that, then you are again back to your original focus. So then the whole process appears like concentration followed by distraction, and again followed by concentration and again distraction. So this is quite a conflicting situation. When you are trying to concentrate on something, your mind always gets distracted and you have to bring it back to what you want to concentrate upon. And then it becomes a struggle. And in that struggle, lot of energy is wasted, is spent. And then at the end of it, there is a lot of fatigue. The brain gets tired of this conflict. And then you don't want to concentrate at all. You just want to be your natural self. So that is what happens when there is a center in attention. That means a point from which you want to attend. But the real attention has no center. So there is no attender there. It's just the attention, just a quality of mind which attends to whatever that is happening. So the watchfulness that arises out of that attention, it is the pure observation. Why am I saying pure? Because there are no motives to observe. There is nothing to be achieved through that observation. The observation is not trying to change the observed. In fact, the observed is completely free to be what it is. So it's altogether a different quality. So if there is that kind of attention being paid to a psychological reaction, is the control really necessary? Because any psychological reaction cannot take hold of you as long as there is that attention. Because all those three possibilities are no possibilities when there is attention. That means there is no struggle to escape, there is no question of yielding or succumbing to the reaction, and also there is no attempt to control it or to suppress it. So the reaction is left to itself to be what it is, and yet there is an observation of that reaction. So in that kind of observation, the reaction unfolds itself completely. Krishnaji calls it as the flowering of the reaction. The reaction flowers, and anything which flowers also withers, because that flower has a limited lifespan, and after flowering, which is actually the peak, there is the withering, and that withering is nothing but the natural death of that psychological reaction. So when a psychological reaction comes to its natural death, there is a sense of freedom. There is a sense of the burden of that psychological reaction getting over. And also there is a sense of lot of energy. So the attention becomes much more energetic, much more intense. So is it possible to observe like that? Because only through that kind of attention, the psychological reactions can come to their natural end and never to arise again. And that creates a lot of space in the brain. Because if the brain is filled up with all kinds of psychological memories, out of which all kinds of psychological reactions are arising, and the brain is constantly occupied with its activities arising out of that psychological conditioning, then such a brain has no space in itself. And without space, the meditation is not possible. In fact, space is very much required even in our day-to-day life. Even physically, we have to have some space. But then the present structure of the cities is such that there is less and less space available for individuals. And without the space, that gives rise to a lot of violence. Because even the psychologically, you need space. The psychological reactions need space in order to flower, in order to unfold. But then without the space, they cannot. And that gives rise to a lot of conflict, which then manifest even at the physical level. So space is very much necessary. And for that space to exist, these psychological reactions they have to come to their natural end. And only when they come to their natural end, there is not only space, but there is also a lot of energy. So attention is very important. And do we live our day-to-day life with that kind of attention? It doesn't matter what you do in your day-to-day life. What is important is whether you are doing it attentively. So if you are thinking something, are you thinking attentively? If you are studying something, are you studying with full attention? Whatever work you may be doing, are you doing it thoroughly with that attention? So to be attentive is more important than what you are paying attention to. What you are paying attention to is all the time changing, varying. Because at a given time you may be doing something, at other time you may be doing something else. But then the same attention will work in both the situations. So if there is an attention, then there is no need to control anything psychologically. You don't have to control your psychological reactions at all. Because as long as there is an attention, the psychological reaction cannot take hold of you. All that it can do is that it can only unfold, show all its color, show all its nature, and come to its natural end. But the moment there is inattention, the reaction will take hold of you. And once it has taken hold of you, then it will make you do things. But your freedom begins the moment you are attentive again. So, in that sense, the attention is very important. And unless one has learned to attend, one possibly cannot meditate. Because the same attention has to be used or has to be given to explore the deeper and subtler aspects of existence. And we have said that attention means energy. And if we are not able to pay attention, which means that we don't have the energy, the required energy. And if we have no energy, we can't do any exploration at all. Not even explorations in our day-to-day life existence, let alone the explorations of the deeper and subtler aspects. That is simply not possible. So actually attention is a very much essential step in meditation. And if one lives one's life attentively, then there is no need to control anything. Then that attention brings understanding, and that understanding brings the right action for that situation. And so as long as there is perception and the action arising out of that, there is no need to control. The control is required only when you don't know what is the right action. And therefore you need the control. But when there is a perception, then out of that perception, the right action emerging, which will completely meet the given situation, and therefore there is no need of control at all. So a life lived without any psychological control is the really free life, a life in freedom actually. And only such a free brain is capable of inquiring into the deeper aspects of living. The brain which is not free is not capable of inquiring. Then the other aspect, which is the measurement. Now the whole of technology is based on measurement. Without measurement, the technology is not possible. And therefore, they need measurement at all levels. So there are finer and finer instruments to measure smaller and smaller things. And then there are also instruments which can measure the huge things, the gigantic things, like distances between the stars and galaxies, or measurements at the nano level. So measurement is very important as far as technology is concerned. Without measurement, technology is not possible. And any measurement involves comparison. Without comparison, the measurement is not possible. There has to be some standard according to which the measurement will be carried out. And then there is always a comparison between what you want to measure and that standard according to which you want to measure. So the same activity of measurement, when it enters the psychological realm, then there again you start measuring. So you compare yourself psychologically with another human being, and based on that comparison, you arrive at some kind of measurement. And you say that, well, that person is better than me, or I am better than him. And then that measurement is about the various skills, various talents, and various other things. So maybe even that may have some valid place. Because when you want to select a person for interesting some job at the physical level, then you want to make sure that you have the best talent available to carry out that job. And then how will you find out the best talent? So that is again through measurement. So you carry out some tests, and then through those tests you measure and find out who may be the right person for that job. But then, apart from the physical, apart from the skills which are required for our day-to-day existence at the physical level, is there any other measurement which may be valid in psychological field? A person who is trying to understand himself, now is he going to understand himself through the psychological measurement? You may say that a person who is very reactive, very short-tempered, may not be useful for certain kinds of works, for certain kind of positions. And therefore, you have to really find out whether a person is short-tempered or not short-tempered, and then accordingly select. So there you may say that you need to measure, you need to compare from the available candidates and select that candidate who may be right person for that kind of job. But when you are trying to understand yourself, your own nature, now are you going to understand your own nature in terms of the nature of the other person? Like say you have a reaction of anger rising in you. Now, are you going to measure that reaction of anger against a similar reaction in the other person? And then based on that measurement, are you going to conclude that your anger is much less than his anger? And therefore you are a better person, better suited person. Now, is that exercise useful at all? I have different kinds of reactions. And if all the time I am comparing my reactions with the corresponding reactions in other persons, and based on that, I am going to satisfy myself that I am in a much better position compared to the other person, right? Then what does that mean? Does it bring any kind of understanding of those psychological reactions? It doesn't. So if it doesn't bring any understanding of psychological reactions, if it doesn't end them, then what is the use of such measurement as far as one's inquiry into oneself is concerned? So probably it has no significance at all. It's pointless to compare oneself with another psychologically, because that comparison is not going to bring any better understanding of yourself. It can only bring about little bit of satisfaction that after all you are better than the other person. But then if you find other person better than you, then either you will feel jealous about him or you will feel depressed. So the measurement in psychological field is giving rise to further psychological reactions in terms of depression, in terms of elation, in terms of jealousies, in terms of fear, in terms of many other things. And therefore probably the comparison is not valid there in the psychological inquiry. So there you want to observe the reaction exactly as it is and not as it appears compared to a similar reaction in the other person. So therefore, in psychological realm, probably there is no place for measurement. You cannot measure a psychological reaction in that sense, because that measurement is not actual or factual. Just to give you an example, say a person who is of some kind of violent nature and he is pursuing the aim of becoming a peaceful person. So his violent behavior or his reaction of violence, he has to go on reducing it. And he says that I am progressively becoming more and more peaceful. So initially, I used to immediately respond in the form of anger. And now that response is decreasing. And slowly, my anger is decreasing. And so there is a measurement of the intensity of the anger. And based on that measurement, the person is concluding that he is becoming less and less angry day by day. And so one day he will be completely free of anger. But even when he is at the last step, the last moment from where the next step is only complete freedom from anger. So even at that moment, it is possible that that anger, which is say maybe 0.00001%, can become 100% at that moment. So in that sense, the measurement turns out to be meaningless, because person who says that he is not angry at all, or who is angry very, very little, but that little anger can become or flare up into big anger any moment, any time, depending upon the provocation. And therefore, as long as anger is there in any form, to whatever extent, there is always a possibility of it flaring up. And therefore, reducing anger progressively seems to be meaningless. It is like spark of a fire. As long as the spark is there is always a possibility of big fire. So unless that spark is completely extinguished, the possibility of fire exists. Same is the case with psychological reactions. Unless the reaction has completely ended, there is no freedom. Even if the reaction may be at very, very low energy level, but as long as it is there is always a possibility of that reaction flaring up and becoming 100% again. So when it becomes 100% again, what happens to all the time and energy one has spent in controlling or reducing that reaction? It has come to nothing. So possibly there is no place for measurement in psychological realm. The measurement only generates further psychological reactions, and therefore there is only addition to whatever we have already accumulated psychologically. And therefore a mind which is all the time measuring cannot possibly meditate, because it will again try to measure the experiences it may get out of that meditation, and based on that measurement will conclude whether the meditation was useful or not useful, or to what extent it was powerful. So is it possible to completely end this process of psychological measurement, which means never to compare oneself psychologically with others? And not only that, never to compare two human beings psychologically. But in our educational system, we do compare one child with another child psychologically. Although we say that we are only comparing academically, but that comparison doesn't remain at academic level. And that becomes very clear in your interaction with those students. You just have to find out how you interact with a child who is doing well academically, and how you interact with a child who is not doing well academically, and what kind of psychological treatment you give to those two kids, the one who is very clever, very smart, good at studies, and the other one whom you consider as very dull, not good at studies. So definitely you treat them differently, even psychologically, which means that there is a psychological comparison there. And that psychological comparison actually doesn't make the cleverer child more cleverer, or doesn't make the other child less clever. So there is no need to compare psychologically at all. So if we want to meditate, then we have to live our day-to-day life without any psychological comparison. Because meditation covers the whole of life. And in that life, if there is psychological comparison, then it's not possible to meditate. So not to compare psychologically at all as one is living one's daily life. Comparison may be necessary at the physical level. The sense that you want to purchase certain item, then you have to compare it. You have to compare different available items and choose the one which is most suitable to you. So there at the physical level, the comparison may be necessary. And we have said that in technology, the measurement is very important. Without measurement, technology is not possible. But in psychological realm, possibly measurement, the psychological measurement is not only not necessary, but it is meaningless. Because what you measure today as very small can always become tomorrow very large. But that is not so in technology. Technology, the material objects cannot simply grow on their own. Whatever you measure them today, they are going to remain the same tomorrow also. But psychologically, any reaction can flare up to any extent, depending upon the situation. So there, even if you have measured a reaction and said that, well, this reaction is not that serious to consider because it is very little, but anytime it can flare up depending upon the situation. Just as the spark of a fire can flare up into a big fire anytime depending upon the situation. So to meditate is to live one's daily life without any control, without any psychological measurement. And one has to really employ one's energy, one's time, one's resources to find out whether it is possible to live this kind of life. Because only then one will be able to meditate. So I think I have covered these two important aspects of meditation. And now your questions can bring further clarity to these.
Good evening, Kishorji. Oh,
Yeah, good
I
evening.
see that.
Yeah,
maybe somebody else also wants to join, wants to ask a question, but if I may,
no, you can ask. Yeah.
This topic is really interesting, and I've in my explorations, what I would like to delve further into, Kishorji, is that You mentioned about senses yesterday or in the morning in the topic, in the same topic, and when you brought up the topic of control, what I've seen is that each sense tries to control like the thought having its own energy, and then maybe the sense of taste just wants to keep on pushing towards eating something or eating a special thing, or so there's all of these different things. And how you said that we don't want to control, but we want to explore, or we want to watch or pay attention. I just feel like that topic, if you could throw some further light, that would be very interesting.
Take the usual example. Now, eating is very common. It's a very common day-to-day life example. But we seem to be eating quite a lot, and which is obvious from the weights of our bodies. The tastier the food, the more the weightage, not only psychologically, but also physically. So, there is nothing wrong in eating a food which is tasty. But then you like that taste and you want the repetition of that taste. And that repetition actually makes you eat more and more. So the physical hunger may have been satiated long before the psychological hunger. Because the body needs or can digest only a specific amount of food. And once you have eaten that amount of food, the physical hunger is over. But the psychological hunger means wanting to eat more and more. And that wanting to eat more and more is due to the desire to repeat the experience of that taste, because I have liked that taste. So one has to really ask, why does one want to repeat any experience for that matter? Is it because one has not lived through that experience completely? And therefore there is this sense that yes, there is something more to get from it. And with that feeling of something more to get from it, therefore you want to repeat it. So if you are able to live through that experience completely, and which is possible only through attention. So you are enjoying the taste while eating, but you are also giving complete attention to that enjoyment, to that taste, so that you notice all the different finer variations or aspects of that taste. And you are actually also observing what exactly it is doing to you. Now, if you have gone through some experience with full attention, so that you have seen everything that experience has in it to show, then do you really need to repeat it? Maybe you want to repeat it once more just to ensure that there is nothing left in it to be learned, to be seen, to be experienced. But then more than that, we need to repeat. When something which is completely known to you, probably you don't want to repeat it. There is no point in repeating it. There is nothing to be gained through that repetition. And therefore, then you don't then over it. Or you don't want the repetition of that pleasure if you have gone through it with full attention. So there again, the attention is useful. So our day-to-day life, whatever we may be going through, we have to go through it with full attention so that every experience gets completed, and then there is nothing further to be experienced in it, and therefore then there is freedom. But if you don't complete the experience, then that experience remains in the memory as an unfulfilled psychological content. And anything which is unfulfilled, always seeking fulfillment. So it will again try to repeat itself whenever the opportunity presents. And so really living one's daily life attentively, there is no alternative for that actually. It can function through everything that happens in our day-to-day life, even inwardly or outwardly.
So, is it just because you understood or attended to that particular taste or particular experience, at that time you may feel fulfilled, but after a few days, again the same chorus goes on. So
After a
you
few
need
days,
repeat,
why?
you need repetitive tasting of that food or that habit, or say if I have some habit of drinking, okay, I may not, but again I need, or any particular food or the tasty food or the sweet dish, again my mind say goes for it, let's have that taste again. So repetition may be by interval, but it goes on.
No, that is because maybe there is the other aspects of one's daily life are not that interesting, or they are full of conflict. Because you see, whenever there is a tension, whenever there is a conflict, right, the person usually seeks release through eating. The persons end up in lot of eating and even drinking in order to escape that conflict or that tension. So psychologically, one may be able to escape through that, but then it does create physical damage, because then the body becomes overweight, and then eating improper food, also it becomes susceptible to various kinds of illnesses and so on. So to escape one kind of suffering, which is tension and psychological conflict, one is giving rise to another kind of suffering, which is various kinds of illnesses and the kind of difficulties that come to the overweighted body. So why does one want to repeat an experience? I think that is very important to investigate. And if you are able to do it completely with even one experience, that can bring the understanding, which then you don't have to repeat for every other experience. Then you will understand what it means to complete an experience or live completely through an experience. So eating may be just an escape from various other facts of our day-to-day life. And when eating becomes an escape, it does give rise to all kinds of troubles physically.
It means we are not that attentive.
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's right.
Yeah, right.
Sir, you have nicely explained the importance of attention in terms of day-to-day living, and also in terms of having the real meditation, which is very valuable and very useful. My question is, what is the uh, relationship of awareness to attention, or when does awareness become attention? Number one. Number two, can we say in a state of attention, one is in a state of meditation?
Yes, I think it is the awareness first. We explained it a little bit in the morning that when you are waking up from your sleeping state, first of all, there is an awareness of your surrounding. That awareness is initially vague because you are not fully awake yet. But as you become fully awake, then there is clearly an awareness of whatever that is around you. Now, out of that awareness, the attention, because whatever you are aware of, some of those things attract your attention. And when your attention goes to that thing, right, there is an observation of that thing. Depending upon the energy of your attention, there will be an observation, a close observation of that. Now, if you get stuck with that, then that attention becomes concentration, because then you have decided that is what you want to attend to. And therefore, anything else which is also demanding your attention or trying to attract your attention, right, you are discarding them or neglecting them. And then you are no longer attentive. Then you have ended up in a state which is called as concentration. And concentration is always accompanied by distraction. So then it becomes a conflicting state. You trying to concentrate, and then there are other factors which are distracting you. And then again, you are pulling yourself back to the concentration. And so a conflict arises out of that, and the corresponding fatigue, tiredness, feeling dullness in the brain, and so on. But if the attention doesn't become concentration, right, then attention is the energy. Attention is the interaction with that which is being attended to. And there is no choice what you are attending to. But as you are attending to one thing, another thing is also demanding or attracting your attention, then you are paying attention to that other thing also. So there is really no choice. And that state of attention, that kind of attentive brain, then is capable of meditation. We are not saying that that attention itself is the state of meditation, but that attention employed, maybe employed is not a right word, but that state of attention exploring or attending to this exploration to find out whether there are deeper and subtler aspects of existence, right, then it is meditation. I may be spending my day-to-day life attentively, and yet I may not be in a meditative state because I haven't discovered the deeper and subtler aspects of my existence. I'm still living at whatever level my day-to-day life.
Sir, Krishnaji talks of attention is summation of energy. It is summation of total energy. What does it mean?
Yeah, it only means that when you are totally attentive, which means that you have employed all your resources, all your energy into that attention.
Does it
Which
mean
is
that the body is also involved in that attention? The heart, the body, the nervous
every
system?
now
Yes, sir.
forget about the body for the time being,
Yeah.
because the body you have through your right kind of living, right? You have put the body in such an healthy state that it is no longer a hindrance to this attention. Right? Because if body is not completely healthy, probably you may not be able to pay attention. The body has to be in a healthy state, has to be completely relaxed. And you must have noticed that when the body is completely relaxed, you are not even aware that you have a body. It's only when there is something wrong with the body, some pain, then you become aware of the body. And then you have to attend to that pain. So a completely healthy body creates such a sense of freedom that you are not even aware that you have a body. But then you are able to sum up all your energy to attend to that exploration, to that inquiry. And only then that inquiry can become meaningful. Because partial attention is no attention at all, because it lacks energy. And Krishnaji has said that attention means energy. And if your attention has no energy, then it is no attention at all. So even to watch a psychological reaction, there has to be an attention with energy. If there is no energy in attention, you cannot even watch the psychological reaction, because then mostly you will yield to that psychological reaction without such energy of attention. So attention means energy, without which nothing is possible.
Yeah, good evening, Kishorji.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good evening.
Okay. I just wanted to sort of try and articulate this question. It may be a bit difficult. Please help me go with this.
Yeah.
Say 5 years ago, I have actually. This is in context of the measurement that you were saying that the measurement doesn't make much sense. Say 5 years ago, I started sort of, I won't call it meditation, sitting for about half an hour every day, trying to sort of calm the mind so that all the psychological reactions, improving my watching of those psychological reactions, let's say. And then over the period of this 5 years, I have, from a reaction perspective, I've started from reaction, then I've started to respond. And now probably I'm starting to manage those. So if I compare that from 5 years ago to now, because of this half an hour of sitting and calming the mind down, if I have to say, I think I've sort of improved. That's the measurement I looked at it from one. That's one approach. If I had to actually go the whole complete giving the attention approach, I would have would have got distracted, again going back, and then would have been in an endless loop. So I'm questioning was whether it is wrong, or is it like a more psychological reaction for me? Am I right in actually doing this measurement in the first place? So I hope I'm clear on the question. So
Yes. See, by practicing certain techniques, you can create certain state of mind, and then with more practice, you are able to maintain that state of mind for a longer period of time. And when you are in that particular state of mind, there are many other things which are not able to function in that state of mind. So then there is a relative peace, relative calm, and then you say that you are able to attend to your work in a much better way in the absence of those other factors which are not able to function in that state of mind. So in that way, that practice has helped. Right? And so you say that you have measured or you have compared your state of mind 5 years ago or many years ago with your state of mind today, and you find that you are in a much better position as far as carrying out your functions or work is concerned, because you have been able to more or less stabilize that state of mind. So that is okay. That is the management of your psychological reactions. But then we are talking of freedom from psychological reactions, not management of psychological reactions. And freedom from psychological reaction can only come through the understanding of those psychological reactions. And that is where the attention is required. Now, usually you may say that, well, I'm attending to one particular thing and suddenly another thing arises and then I have to pay attention to that another thing, and then the third thing arises, then I have to pay attention to that third thing, right? And so then my mind is completely scattered, because then I am not actually paying attention to anything. But I started with one thing and then the other thing pulled me away from it, and before I am able to give complete attention to that other thing, the third thing pulled me again, and so there is no attention to anything at all. So the brain is completely scattered. But what you have said is true for concentration, not for attention. So attention doesn't mean that you stop paying attention to the first thing when you have started paying attention to the second thing. Attention is inclusive. The quality of attention is inclusive. So it doesn't select, but it includes everything. Nothing is excluded. And since nothing is excluded, there is no conflict. There is no question of distraction. So whatever you are paying attention to, you are still paying attention to that, but then you are also paying attention to the other thing which has come up. And if anything else comes up, the attention is being paid to that. So it's altogether a different quality of the mind. And that quality is very much required. In tradition also, the attention is translated as avdhan. And then they say that there are people who could be ashtavdhani. That means they can pay attention to 8 different things at the same time. So maybe that is a measurement and all this thing, but it only explains that it is possible to pay attention to several things at the same time. So one doesn't have to give up one to pay attention to the another. But that
Thank you, sir.
happens with concentration. Yeah.
Okay. A quick follow-up here, Kishoreji. So this, the attention that, the effortless attention that actually goes towards it, does it bring a permanent ending of those psychological reactions, or is it, so because thoughts do come back, the thinker does come back, and the day-to-day
Yeah.
just goes on.
Yeah. So that is then the state of inattention. But what happens is that the energy of attention, if it is less than the energy of the reaction, right, then it results in the state of inattention, because then that psychological reaction takes hold of you. It is more powerful, more energetic, and which means that you have yielded to that psychological reaction. And yielding to a psychological reaction is a state of inattention. And only when that psychological reaction has subsided, you may become aware of your inattention. And then maybe you are attentive again. So which means that to be really attentive, there has to be a lot of energy. And that energy you can derive from your own day-to-day life by living rightly, you can save a lot of energy so that your attention becomes much more powerful, much more energetic. And therefore, you are able to attend to any reaction, having any kind of energy.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sir, can I just share a few things, sir?
Yes, yes,
Regarding,
surely. Yeah.
regarding Kiran's state and all, like I feel initial stages, like taking some time for oneself, and I feel that kind of a pause is maybe needed. Like I think even when we read Krishnaji's books, he used to tell children to take some time in the morning to yoga, just sit quietly. All those things he used to encourage, but maybe nothing is an end in itself. It's just a process, just to take a pause from your day-to-day activities. Maybe it may not amount to account to anything, the ending and all are much more severe deeper processes, but just to take a pause for a while so that you can take cognizance of your feelings or emotions and where your life is going out and all that. So for that, just a little bit of pause, I feel is essential, and it's good. At least one can collect their thoughts, and at least one can have a good perspective and all. That's one point, sir. And regarding the other point, like today was the morning, I was mentioning about the two videos, that you sent.
Yeah, yeah.
So the first video where he was conversing with he was engaging the audience and all. So he was telling basically about, what is not meditation and all that. But in the end, he says, sir, like, without goodness and without love, you can't make a good society. That's how he concludes. So I feel apart from seeing, what are the qualities the thought plays, like, it's a comparison, measurement, division.
Yeah.
Apart from that, it's also essential whether one is, what kind of a person one is, consideration, goodness, love, sensitivity. I feel these are also like, complementary things, like, one has to have, if one has to go deeper into these things, because these are also are mentioned in different areas by Krishnaji, sir. So I feel, apart from that, these also one needs to be, aware of, whether because if one is so self-absorbed, it's all the time bothering about that, because these things are also one need to take cognizance into, sir. Because that's
Yeah,
what I
that
want to
aspect
say.
we are going to focus in tomorrow's dialogue. What you
Yes, sir,
have
yes.
mentioned, the second
Yes.
point,
Yeah.
that we are going to consider in tomorrow's dialogue.
Yes.
So I just wanted to complete these basic things
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
today. And so tomorrow we will spend more time on the aspect which you have mentioned just now. But then talking
Yes.
about the pause, right?
Yes.
It is the inquiry which should determine whether a pause is needed or not needed. But if a
Yeah.
person is taking pause routinely, that means he's setting aside some time, and in that time he wants to sit quietly and then trying to go through something, right? And it becomes a routine, then probably that pause will not do much difference
Yes.
as far as his understanding is concerned. But if the inquiry demands that there is a need for pause to reflect upon something, to dwell upon something, then
Yeah.
yes, then that pause will be very useful and something definitely will come out of it. So
Yes.
actually, anything which is done without understanding why we are doing it becomes a method, a system,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
mostly blindly followed. And then it only imposes certain pattern on the already burdened brain. And so
Yes.
it is not much useful as far as meditation is concerned. But yes, if the inquiry demands that, yes, I need to sit quietly and dwell upon these things, then certainly that pause has a lot of meaning and a lot of benefit there.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, this question is from the chat.
Yeah.
Traditional religions have given great importance to purity of the mind.
Yes.
purity in thought and action. In
Yes.
case teachings, does he see the issue of purity in a different way?
Yeah, I mean, Krishnaji also says, he talks about contamination and ending of the contamination. And he says that the thought is responsible for contamination. Now, when he says thought, he actually means the thinker, because thinker is the product of thought. So this thinker, the ego, the me, the self-centered entity, is actually the contaminator. And as long as that me exists, you cannot have a purity of anything, because anything you will get will be contaminated by that thinker. In last workshop, I think probably it was in Marathi workshop, we gave an example of a dirty water. And so a person having a glass of dirty water, that glass is half filled, and somebody who has pure water, this fellow wants that pure water, but then he has that glass is the only glass he has which already has some dirty water, and he is asking that other fellow to pour some of his pure water into that glass. But the other fellow sees that that glass already has a dirty water, and he says that, well, I cannot give my pure water to you in that glass. You have to first empty it. And this fellow says, I don't know how to empty that glass. I can't do anything with the content of that glass. All that I have is this glass. It has some space. So please give me that pure water in the same glass. But the other person will refuse to give that pure water, because he knows that the moment that pure water is poured in that, it has already lost its purity. It will also become dirty. So, although you say that the purity of mind, the purity of motive, or whatever purity is important, but as long as there is this contaminant present, you cannot have that purity, because whatever you may try to get at, all that will be again soiled, again made dirty by this contaminant or contaminant. And so that is why it is important to empty the consciousness of its content, because we have said that the only psychological content in our consciousness is the psychological content which is put together by thought, the thinker. And the thinker is made up of that content. So emptying the content amounts to ending of the thinker, the ending of the contaminator. And only when the contaminator has ended, right, and therefore there is that emptiness, in that emptiness, then the pure things can find place, or they can be there without losing their purity. And so although the tradition talks about purity, but it doesn't focus on who is responsible for creating impurity and what is to be done with it. So just by practicing some method, you cannot arrive at purity, because it is the same contaminator who is practicing the purity, and therefore it is not purity at all. It is only impurity.
Kishorji, if there's no other question, I just wanted to reinforce that understanding. For me, I think it all's coming together, that if we don't, our lives are so busy that we don't want to have that much attention or time, and it's almost a matter of energy. And when you were describing to Kiran earlier about psychological reaction having a greater amount of energy than our energy of attention.
yeah,
So it almost sounds like there's a finite amount of energy we have, at least
yes,
at the current state. So somehow we have to budget.
yeah,
I mean, it sounds like there's a controller who's trying to budget the energy, but it's a reality that we don't have unlimited energy. So something has to give.
yeah.
You
Yeah,
know.
no, that's right. So one has to find out where one's energy is going. I mean, which means that you have to observe your day-to-day activities and day-to-day life more closely and really try to find out what is essential and what is not essential. And anything which is unessential, one has to just drop it so that the energy becomes available. Because energy is the most required and yet the least available thing. Because we seem to spend our energy in, or not spend, but we actually squander our energy into so many things. And the obvious physical actions at the physical level, but apart from that, much more psychologically. Because any kind of psychological conflict, any kind of psychological reaction is the spending of that energy. And one has to really learn how to recover these. So maybe initially one may pay attention to the milder psychological reactions, maybe the likes and dislikes at superficial levels, because many times we may end up in doing something which actually we don't want to do it, but because we don't have anything else to do, therefore we end up in doing that. And so one has to watch this kind of tendencies and not spend one's energy into doing those things which one really is not interested in doing, but one is doing just because one has nothing else to do at that moment. So one has to really learn to conserve one's energy as one lives one's day-to-day life, and always trying to find a way of minimum energy, because that is how the nature functions. All the processes in nature, they happen in the way in which the minimum amount of energy is spent. And if we want to be part of nature, then maybe we have to do the same thing in our day-to-day life also.
Yeah. Sounds good. Thank you, Kishoreji.
Sir, one
Yeah.
question or observation. Kindly take it up tomorrow if you, or take it up if you feel it's relevant. So you said awareness is something that it's simply awareness. It's already there. We open our eyes and we are aware of things. Then attention is something you said. Something things draw. Our attention is drawn to something.
Yes.
And if that attention is corrupted, then it becomes concentration in some way. Or if the attention is exclusive, then it becomes concentration. So, and in the rest of the talk, we are almost talking of attention as a way of life, as a new way of life.
Yeah.
Now, so awareness is natural, it's there. Thinking as a way of life is also very natural to us. No, it's effortless. We can effortlessly think whatever we want. But this attention as a way of life, this is a new quality, and any guidance, insight you would give on this would be very helpful. Because how can attention become as effortless as thinking?
Yeah, I think maybe we need more time to answer this question, to go into it. What is that quality of attention? Whether it is the product of thought or what it is actually. So I think we'll go into it maybe tomorrow, maybe in the next dialogue.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Because it doesn't, only a categorical answer may not satisfy or may not meet that question. You have to go a little bit deeper to actually find out what is that quality of attention, what way it is different than thought or the thinking process. So maybe we end our meeting at this point.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you, everybody. Yeah,
Sir.
thank you, everybody. Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you.